Welcome back, everyone, to the It's Just Coffee podcast. We've got a special edition today. We've got Craig Simon joining us, three-time Australian Barista Champion, multiple-time award-winning barista. Welcome to the show, Craig. Thanks for coming.
Woo! Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to having a chat.
So the reason I've got you on is you're co-hosting with me today. I'm going to get you on for another interview another time, but today you're essentially co-hosting with me on a topic of particular importance. So recently, the Specialty Coffee Association of Panama released a statement that was, in many ways, it was huge. It was controversial in a lot of ways, and I think it's kind of split the industry down the middle. And we're going to sort of break that down today, discuss it. And I thought you were very qualified to come on and help me with this because you're a Q Grade Instructor. So could you explain a little bit, firstly, about Q grading and then why you're and the level above that, which is Q Grade Instructing?
Okay. Q grading is an international certification accreditation for evaluating coffee. It's administered by the Coffee Quality Institute that was founded. Their mission is to raise the quality of livelihoods of producers and farmers, coffee producers and farmers, and to do that through the evaluation of coffee so that it can be traded at fair price for how its quality level. It is administered by instructors like myself. There's around 50 of us in the world, I think, at the moment.
That's very few for the amount of people that probably have a Q grade qualification. That could be in the tens of thousands, and yet there's only 50 instructors in the world.
Yeah, there's not too many people. Not too many people are instructors. There seems to be a rolling 5,000 to 10,000 number of Q graders around the world. Lots of people don't necessarily keep currency in it. You have to constantly be recertified every 3 years to maintain your accreditation. And so for a lot of people, they view it as I'm going to have my skills assessed and achieve the certification, but not continue to renew. So the number doesn't actually necessarily keep increasing, even though the number of people who have been through the process have definitely increased.
And so the layer above that, Q grade instructing, which we're talking about now, where along the sort of chronology of it were you? Were you the first, second, first?
In terms of instructor, I was the first instructor in the Southern Hemisphere.
Okay.
In terms of Q grading, I was part of the cohort that sat the first Q course in Australia back in 2011. And back then there weren't too many people in Australia that were Q graders. Now there's quite a few. We've had quite a lot of people come through the course and achieve their accreditation. So, but yeah, there are not that many people that do instruct it. Obviously, the combination of skills of being able to have very high sensory acuity and ability to apply that while tasting coffee, and then also be a good educator. They're not necessarily skills that do go together. You know, we come across obviously lots of people that are very good educators. We come across lots of people that are very good tasters, and but yeah, the people that want to put those two things together and share their skills with the industry is, I guess, a bit less. Yeah.
So I'm going to come back to everything you've just said a bit later on in the podcast.
Okay.
I'm going to highlight as well that you and I are actually sharing a coffee right now. I'm going to come back to that later too. So I haven't told you what it is, but I'm relying on your Q grader skills to kind of contextualize what the point I'm going to try and make at the end of this podcast. So you've also read the statement from the Specialty Coffee Association of Panama.
I have.
I would like your immediate reaction, just a summary of it, and then I'll give mine, and then we'll go through and actually read it, and we'll kind of invite you, the listener, viewer, into that as well. So your immediate reaction to it.
Okay. I think immediately I'm in two minds. I guess for offering opinion, I probably should be in one mind. But I think there's definitely, it feels a little unnecessary to say these sorts of things. You know, I think in terms of competition, people often try and achieve results, and sometimes they do that intentionally or otherwise. Accidentally, they miss the mark on what the rules and regulations are, and they're excluded. And so I think that some of those things probably could have been left unsaid. Maybe it's not necessary to make a statement about validity of a coffee submission for an auction in a public forum. Obviously, making a statement means that they are making a position on what in their statement is that these are coffees that have auxiliary additions to the coffee to manipulate the flavour outcomes and therefore influence their success in competition. So I feel that there's definitely two parts to it. I appreciate a statement on we feel this doesn't elevate the quality of this competition, therefore we don't want a part of it. I respect that totally. And then you have the position of this is one of the most respected coffee auctions that effectively led the industry in terms of achieving higher and higher values for coffees. To make that statement, I guess, is a pretty strong political statement that I guess would cause a lot of upset amongst those producers who feel that additive coffee processing methods are a valuable contribution to the industry.
100%. And I guess my immediate reaction to it is, there's a lot of it I agree with. There's a lot of it that I agree with. I don't want to see certain coffees in that format, but there's also some of it where I thought, well, you kind of took a few shots there at some people that you didn't really need to. And again, I'll get to that point later on the podcast, but I'm going to read the statement now. So bear with us for a minute or two while I do that. But I think it's very important. So the statement, the title of it is Rejecting the Introduction of Infused Coffees in the Best of Panama Competition and/or Specialty Coffee Association of Panama. So the statement reads, given our history and the role in the industry, particularly with Panama Geisha and Panama's unique coffee heritage, we feel compelled to emphasize the importance of preserving the authentic identity of Panamanian coffee, especially in competitions like the Best of Panama. This year's Best of Panama competition faced a significant challenge when 4 coffees were found to be altered from their natural DNA expression, likely with the intent to score higher and win by using foreign additives. Fortunately, the judges quickly identified this attempt to cheat. Despite the setback, the competition proceeded successfully, featuring 180 strong competitors representing the true coffee profiles of Panama's unique terroir. Now, this is where it gets even more interesting. As the coffee industry is still relatively young, many consumers are eager to taste and trust authentic flavors. Unfortunately, the market is flooded with altered coffees masquerading as specialty coffee products using deceptive terms like co-fermented or thermal shock to mislead buyers. While producers in other countries may use such methods, sometimes transparently and sometimes not, it becomes a pressing issue when families in Panama who participate in Best of Panama and who are members of the S.C.A.P. See their hard work jeopardized by these practices. As members of S.C.A. and pioneers in the coffee industry, we urge other competition bodies around the world to adopt a stance that ensures food safety for consumers and prevents the artificial homogenization of different terroirs and varietals worldwide. We believe that altered or infused coffees should be categorized separately, clearly distinguishing them from genuine specialty coffee, signed by J. Hunter Tedman, S.C.A.P. President. All right. So a few hot takes in there.
Yep.
I kind of feel like this was always coming. And it's kind of like in one mind where we both just said, okay, well, there's probably a few shots taken at some people here. It's also kind of good that we start the conversation because I think it's previously been had behind closed doors. No one's really brave enough to say it publicly. So, on first part, I'd like to congratulate the person who wrote this, Mr. Tedman, who I would love to get on the podcast in the future because quite frankly, he's had some kahunas to actually say something. Whether he's right or wrong, history will be the judge. But I think we as an industry, not a lot of us are brave enough to say things like that. So, congratulations to him on that. Let's start with let's start with the second paragraph here. This is the natural DNA expression. So, the competition faced a significant challenge where 4 coffees were found to be altered from their natural DNA expression. What does that mean?
I guess it's just talking about terroir, right? And I think that, I think it's extremely valid in celebrating excellence of a taste-based product, right? Where it grows is going to, and what the tree is naturally going to influence the flavors that you can experience from a primary level, right? As in where you grow it and what that is is the initial genesis of those flavors. And I think that is one of the great joys of the coffee product when you go and taste it, is the journey that you can go on that talks of its place. And I do genuinely feel strongly that there is so much value that should be protected about the expression of a coffee based on where it's grown. And I definitely support this idea that there needs to be a separation of coffees that are flavor doctored into their own category, purely, even if it is just for that.
And I totally agree with you. And Liam and I had a terrific discussion with Mark Dundon last week, similarly to this. But I'm interested to know here. It says 4 coffees were found to be altered from their original DNA expression. That would have had to be, I would hope, tested. Maybe some Q graders sort of picked up on it and thought, no, we're going to disqualify that. Some judges from the Best of Panama. One of the only ways that you could really test for this, to my knowledge, is using gas chromatography mass spectrometry. And if you want to see a good application of that to coffee, go and watch Dale Harris's World Barista Competition routine from 2017, which is essentially all about that. I know that's a mouthful, but go and watch it. GCMS for short.
South Korea, right?
South Korea, Seoul.
Yeah,
South
it's really
Korea.
good.
Shout out to Dale there. But that would be, are you aware of any other way where you can actually test this?
No, and I would think that to me, that is the controversial part of this statement is I would want to see the evidence of that outcome being applied properly to be able to make that statement. And I think that definitely is the grey area that we find ourselves in with this for our product, is that it is very difficult to determine just on taste alone. There are definitely some indicators, but you do need to apply a tasting worldliness and experience base that you've accumulated, and you do probably have to apply a bit of subjective opinion to, is this doctored or not? Have I ever experienced this sort of expression before? There have definitely been coffees that I've tasted since co-fermentation and additive flavor outcomes has become part of coffee, that have tasted of things I've never tasted in coffee, and that you intuitively would not expect to taste in the product, where to me it feels misleading. But interestingly, often my personal experience with these coffees is that they don't present as enjoyable tasting experiences. They're overwhelming, they're cloying,
right,
they're monotonal, they're not actually an elevated tasting experience. So they kind of knock themselves out with my own subjective evaluation of them. So
to I guess summarize that for listeners, what I was saying before as well, GCMS, gas chromatography mass spectrometry, it identifies compounds in certain things, and this isn't used in coffee really. It's used in like criminal investigations to find DNA samples or chemicals in someone's system when they've died, things like that. And so Dale's successfully applied it to coffee, and I guess it would be one of the few, albeit expensive, ways that you could actually test something. And where I would love to see that applied to the coffees here, if that's how it was identified, I would love some clarity around that. And I would also love to see it in the World Barista Championship. I believe that they've expanded the rules so that co-fermented coffees can be used in the competition, but in previous years, Anthony Douglas was a good example. He won fair and square, in my opinion, and people accused him of cheating behind closed doors. Didn't really have the kahunas to say it publicly, but people accused him of cheating, and I thought that was really unfair. Kind of clouded the thing in a way.
I think if you make accusations, and there's always going to be tall poppy, right? Like there's always going to, if someone wins something, everyone who didn't win is always going to have some commentary on it about why they felt slighted or how it was unfairly manipulated in someone else's favor. And fair's fair. If you win and the rules regulators don't pull it up on it, then you've won, right? Like that's well done. Whether you would consider it cheating or not is another matter. I mean, I think if we're going to stay on the specifics of that, I think that really what we're uncovering is just a difficulty in the transparency of these processes and the fact that we haven't yet categorized a space for them so that they can exist and be valued what their actual value is, while being able to declare what they are. And I think that that's a really important set of classifications we probably need to get to, because our product is valued on its taste quality. Like that, most of the assessment of coffee is brewing it, and taste evaluation determines its quality, which determines its sell value. So until we actually create that boundaries around what fermentation methodologies are used, and whether it is a manipulated product or whether it is just a classically fermented version of it, then we will always have these challenges of having a human make a decision on a taste-based hunch that, oh, maybe that was doctored.
But this is where I think where we kind of need to have a mature discussion, and keyword being mature discussion. Because if you're going to make an accusation like that, I think the onus should be on you to prove it. So, and one of the only ways you can do is send it off for testing using GCMS, and then publicly disclose those findings transparently. That would be what I'd like to see, and what I'd like to see out of this as well. So, but let's move to the next part I wanted to sort of highlight. Fortunately, the judges quickly identified this attempt to cheat. So this is where it gets a bit spicy, because they use the word cheat. You and I had a look, and to be fair, there probably is, rule books that provided to producers. We just can't see it. If they cheated, there needs to be rules that are broken, right? What are the rules? I haven't seen any, and I'd quite like to see them if there are. So it's not enough to really, for me, to come out and say they identified the attempt to cheat without providing the rules that were sort of broken. Is that fair to you? Would you say?
Definitely, I think if there's a statement that says there's an intent to cheat, rules should be demonstrated that would have to clearly say coffees are not allowed to be manipulated with other additives, right? The murky territory that we live in is for processing. You still have to ferment it, so you still have to do stuff to the coffee once it comes off the tree. It's not like picking an apple off the tree and giving it a rinse and putting some wax on it and sending it to the shop. You're taking it off the tree and you're doing something to get those seeds to the point of being dried, which does influence what they taste like. So there's secondary processing that has to occur, and they're adding stuff to it is, I guess, totally valid in a sense. There's nothing wrong with adding to it until it gives you a competitive advantage, like doping in cycling or whatever. If these things become that sort of version where you can manipulate outcome, because we are so fixated on flavor expression as contributing to the quality valuation of coffee, then there needs to be some very clear determination and rules in place to be able to move forward.
Yeah, and I'm kind of thinking of the scenario now. So 4 coffees were identified. In practice, what does that mean? Is that judges kind of trying the coffee at the site and saying, hey, these are irregular compared to the others? Was it tested, or was it just disqualified based on those findings? I'd be really interested to know, and I think it should be disclosed given the public nature of this. The next sort of stanza I'd outline is there's a quote that says, unfortunately, the market is flooded with altered coffees masquerading as specialty products using deceptive terms like co-fermented or thermal shock to mislead buyers. So this is where this is probably the hottest, the barometer is just off the charts here for me. Co-fermented, I can see how you would probably disregard that as specialty coffee. There's a good argument for it. It's in its own category. Whether people enjoy it or not, that's a totally different thing. I can understand that. Thermal shock for me seems like a big gloves off swing at Colombian coffee producers.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I have seen many other countries use thermal shock though. So I would say maybe it's just a swing at manipulation without disclosing, rather than necessarily a country. And
this is my opinion. It is not a representative of anyone else's. I'm now putting out my opinion. I think this was a direct shot at 2 particular Colombian coffee producers. One being Diego Bermudez from Finca El Paraíso, and the other, I don't know the name of the producer. I think it's El Diviso. I might be getting this wrong. Don't sue me. The El Diviso Coffee Farm, who I believe are two of the most known producers embracing the thermal shock. Now, when we introduced the coffee podcast, we kind of outlined your credentials as a taster, and we're talking about thermal shock. I've got a quick question for you.
Yes.
Did you enjoy that coffee that I made for you?
I enjoy all coffee. I actually like coffee. So
yeah, but what were your thoughts on that coffee that I made for you? And be completely honest, because I'll introduce this by saying I know this is not a coffee that you would enjoy. You enjoy the classical coffee flavors. Is that a fair thing to say?
I genuinely actually enjoy. I really like coffee. I find it intriguing. And over the 20 odd years that I've been involved in coffee, I've had to use product that is all the way from quite literally the cheapest coffee I can buy, all the way through to, like more expensive than buying a secondhand car type cost. And so, I kind of see my input as trying to maximize the value that's there. Whether that's trying to elevate something that's a very low cost version of coffee that has flavor flaws that you're trying to manipulate at the roasting process.
To the point, though.
Okay, sorry.
You enjoyed this coffee.
I'm avoiding making the statement, right?
Let me ask you a few questions in quick succession. This coffee, we introduced you as a Q grader. Didn't reveal what this coffee was. Did it taste infused to you, like it's been co-fermented or doctored with anything?
I would argue that it had a very obvious singular flavor that didn't change with time or temperature, which to me points towards it being potentially improved externally.
Okay, now this is where it gets really spicy, because this was a thermal shock geisha from Diego Bermudez himself. So maybe we're uncovering things. We don't know for sure. Be great to get some tested, but that's what the coffee was.
Okay.
And that's why I intentionally left it from didn't disclose it at the start. And maybe I'm kind of rebutting and disproving my own point here, because it's a bit hard for baristas to come out and say, well, this is cheating. And I think this was kind of, first popped up a few years ago when Sasha Sestig wrote an article about thermal shock coffees in perfect daily grind. It got a lot of heat, and we might even post a link in the show notes to some of these articles. And it got to the point where the discourse around it was so hot that he wrote a follow-up article that clarified it. And then a guy by the name of Christopher Ferran, who runs a really, he posts somewhat, not overly frequently, but he wrote a blog about this that kind of said, I can't remember. I won't quote it because I'll get it wrong. But he had a very nuanced response to it. So to me, it's like when I taste infused coffee, and I'm not a Q grader like you are, but when I taste coffee like this, when I taste coffee that's been co-fermented, you can kind of tell when it is. To me, this just tastes like an anaerobic ferment. And that's kind of like what a lot of anaerobic ferments does. And you've got a very hot take that you're going to elaborate on further about this, but I'm going to disagree. And this doesn't have to be all on the same note here. To me, it just tastes like an anaerobic, and I don't know that you could. It's kind of disregarding the effectiveness of co-fermentation if you were to throw all these coffees under the same boat.
And look, and I think that maybe that's potentially part of why this statement is really valid, in that there isn't transparency and full disclosure amongst the industry of what people are doing to it. So if people are getting suspicious and lumping things together and just making assumptions, if we just take everything on face value and evaluate it on quality, maybe we're uncovering that our quality evaluation methodology actually is what needs to change, so that certain flavor expressions or lack of complexity in the lifeline of your tasting experience get evaluated differently. Like maybe that actually is the position that it's exposing, is that it's less about don't do this, this is trying to cheat, all of those sorts of outcomes. It's kind of irrelevant in a sense, as long as there's disclosure as to what something is, so that if you are going to have a competition, you can fairly put things in their correct category. You can't. We separate, distances. We separate the genitalia you're born with. You compete under different classes. We're separated in all sorts of competitions. They have rule books that allow fair competition of same skill sets. And I think that that's totally valid to have that. And I think that really what this is exposing for my umbrella opinion is just that we just need transparency and categorization so that it can be part of a fair competition, because there's nothing wrong with any of the coffees that people taste. We consume it for enjoyment, right? So
yeah,
if people enjoy it, it doesn't matter how that's made, unless it's trying to pretend to be something else and achieve value unfairly.
Yeah, and I guess that sort of highlights the last sentence in this that says, we believe altered or infused coffee should be categorized separately, clearly distinguishing them from genuine specialty coffee. Now, this is where I'm just going to go ahead and agree. If it's co-fermented, it does not belong in, the way I understand it, the Best of Panama has a washed category and a natural category, yeah?
I believe so.
So, I mean, does anaerobic fermentation fit into the scheme of natural as well, or anaerobic natural?
Well, why don't we just have another category?
Yeah, so maybe there needs to be an anaerobic category. I want to say to everyone clearly, I don't think co-fermented coffees belong in a Best of Panama or Cup of Excellence setting. I just don't think they do. I mean, it doesn't highlight the hard work and the terroir of particular farms. It doesn't highlight the hard work of the farmers. My personal belief is they don't belong there. And perhaps maybe in Barista Competition, maybe not. That's the point we'll discuss in a minute. Your take?
Like I said, I think that there can be categories for everything. I think that the best version of co-infused coffees, you can still taste the terroir and the varietal and the hard work, and it's a layer. The worst versions of them, it's all you can taste, and it could be any coffee. And I think that's for me the differentiator about whether it's a good or a bad version of something. And I think that overall, the best version that we could get coffee to is that there are exceptional, excellent, good, average, poor versions of types. That would allow a lot more value for a lot more people. If we have our value only on the most expensive coffees are only classical processing methodologies of Gesha coffees grown in Panama, then only those farms have exclusivity to have access to those sorts of price of their product. If we started to say that, well, yeah, Gesha does seem to grow better and have better expression in these regions, in these countries, so that's what you plant there, and then you sell it good, excellent, exceptional, poor. But Typica has exceptional expression of its terroir and its varietal in these countries, or this elevations, or this processing method. Like if we have that, I feel like that's the missing part of how we go about coffee at the moment. It does seem to be very much like everything gets compared to everything, and so it becomes muddied because some things don't do that well but can still be exceptional. It's almost like all of the rest has to. It's a class system.
Have you judged the Best of Panama?
I've not judged any best ofs.
So have you cupped like all the coffees that have gone through before?
I've cupped a lot of the best of coffees. I've cupped at a lot of the farms that submit to best of auctions, and they certainly make exceptional coffees.
Yeah, and I would say to anyone that's listening to this for the first time or sort of new to coffee that Panama does produce, I guess I can fairly say, the best of the best coffees. And I can see why, to an extent, the Panamanian producers want to protect their asset or, thank you, gentlemen. I can see why they would want to protect what their identity is, and that's more or less what the statement's trying to do. But let's get to the next part on that note. While producers in other countries may use such methods, sometimes transparently and sometimes not, it becomes a pressing issue when families in Panama who participate in the Best of Panama and who are members of the S.C.A.P. See their hard work jeopardized by these practices. See, this is where I'm gonna give away my hot take early. I had a hot take which is very much on this subject, so I'll disclose it early. You don't actually have anything to defend here, Best of Panama. Panama producers, there's not actually anything to defend. I think the industry universally acknowledges that you're the best of the best. The best coffees in the world are produced in Panama. I don't think there's to me, it's kind of like someone going up to Michael Jordan in the 90s and saying, you're not the best basketball player. I think Michael Jordan would just laugh it off. And I think that's what the producers in Panama should do as well. Like, that's them. I think everyone else is...
I guess maybe it points to the if we want to, in inverted commas, prize money for winning these auctions. You know, the number one winning auction lot for Best of Panama sells for thousands and thousands of dollars.
Tens of thousands per
kilo, right?
Now.
So that's a massive, you know, if you can achieve that outcome with less infrastructure, with less practice, with less skill and investment in the process, then is that fair? Is that a fair playing field that you get rewarded a lot greater than the people that have followed different methodologies? And I intentionally avoided the word correct methodologies. But if we're not comparing people on the same set of criteria and skills, then is it a fair outcome for people to be able to get there without having to do the hard work? You know, if we go back to that sporting concept of, you know, if you can win through cheating by using other things to assist in your performance, then is that really a valid outcome is it a fair outcome for everyone? And arguably in this case, it's easy to say, I don't think it's a fair outcome. We just don't necessarily have a set of protocols in place to be able to call it properly cheating, because we haven't established what it is, what people are doing, because it's not transparent or disclosed fully.
There may be a set of rules that aren't public. Perhaps they are, but we couldn't find them. I couldn't find them on when looking for them on the internet. And so, I mean, how are we to know that if people are really actually cheating? There's an argument here. So we were talking about to the Seven Seeds founder Mark Dundon recently, and he kind of has this particular topic of conversation where he says, what really is specialty coffee? Is there such a thing? And Panama coffee is objectively, we can now say objectively, some of the highest grade coffee in the world. I think the highest, scores the highest. And we have a system, the Q grader, to identify that. And there's a level of scrutiny there because it goes through a lot of people. It's not just like one person cupping it and making a decision. There's a panel of judges.
Yeah, and there's multiple assessments as well. It's not just the one tasting evaluation. They go through local evaluations. They go through many rounds of these same coffees to achieve the outcome. So
and people kind of look at these co-fermented coffees as if they're the devil. And I can understand why people in the industry would do that. But why don't we turn around and look at consumers here? It's not like the common man is going to just try a natural geisha from, I don't know, Finca Hartman. That's now Proud Mary did it and sold the number one Best of Panama last year for $200 a coffee. The common man's not going to go and try that. They probably won't even get an opportunity to cup that. But you can go try a cinnamon infused latte. Like, full disclosure again, I sell co-fermented coffees at my shop, so maybe I'm a hypocrite, but this is where my evidence is. I also sell $20 cups of geisha, and more people can afford and have access to a co-fermented coffee. And I would argue that you can actually taste the flavors that are in the co-fermented coffee, and the common man might not identify a strawberry in a natural geisha. So I just don't like this discussion where there's probably an argument, really, where they're not genuine specialty coffee. Okay, that's a set of words. But the common man can actually have access to it and try it. And I think it's a really good thing for our industry.
Well, I would say the argument is that it should be applied to not specialty coffee to elevate it, and that it actually provides access to more interesting flavors at a more approachable price point. And that by applying it to already really high quality coffees is actually is the missed opportunity in that you don't need to. And so like what you're doing, I think, is the good version of it, where you're disclosing what it is, you're pricing it appropriately to the difficulty in manufacturing it and the risk involved in manufacturing it. And it has that value, and people are welcome to go on that journey. You're not selling the cinnamon latte for $20 next to the Gesha for $20, right?
No, $6.50 Australian for a cinnamon latte.
And that's where the value proposition becomes muddied, and I guess why Best of Panama has made this statement. They feel that cinnamon latte is trying to compete with natural Gesha unfairly. If it's disclosed, no dramas. But if it's not disclosed, that's problematic.
And is there if there's a coffee professional that is out there, so I use the word coffee professional, so they've been in the industry, let's say, for 2 years for this purpose, that chooses a cinnamon latte daily over a natural geisha. Honestly, I don't know if there is such a thing, because these coffees, they're great. They have certain applications, but it's not something that you really want to drink every day. I said to Mike Dundon as well, I'll drink coffee. We had a coffee on the house blend here just before we started. I'll drink that every day. That's my wake up material. I won't have a cinnamon latte every day, even though it tastes awesome and it's got a bit of a uniqueness to it. It's not like you can really drink these things every day, and that's why I don't think they're really in the same stratosphere and or even competing with the Panama Geishas. Is my take.
Yeah, I think it's valid.
Yep.
I'm not even sure it's spicy.
You're not sure what I just said? Spicy?
Yeah. Seems very fair and measured.
All right. Well, you're gonna have to carry the load with the extra hot take with 2 sugars later. But moving on, last stanza of this statement, I guess. As members of the S.C.A. and pioneers in the coffee industry, we urge the other competition bodies around the world to adopt a stance that ensures food safety for consumers and prevents the artificial homogenization of different terroirs and varietals worldwide. Now, here's probably the most, I would say, pragmatic thing in the whole statement, because what if there are allergens in these that are infused into the coffees, and if someone drinks it, then they could potentially become unwell or harmed just by drinking a coffee? So labeling is essential here. And how do we go about that? Because, I guess I'm a major stakeholder in how this is sort of performed, and what's the compounds. And it's not necessarily that the fruit, well, it is kind of that the coffee tastes like what the fruit does, but it's also the compounds of the fruit are co-fermented or absorbed by the coffee. So there's probably a genuine safety issue there.
Potentially, if it's not food safe. We all remember the glycol in the wine controversy, that producers were putting glycol in the wine to extend it and create outcomes. That was not so good. That was not disclosed. That needed to be...
Did it make people unwell?
I'd assume it's not good to drink glycol. It's antifreeze.
Yeah, okay. Antifreeze. So you can't actually freeze wine that are treated with the glycol.
It's got alcohol, so actually you can freeze wine. There's not enough alcohol in it.
Is that like a preservative?
I think so. I wish I'd done some research before I brought that up to remember the details. But I think it was Swiss or German in the 70s or 80s. They were extending wine with glycol.
Okay,
and that was not so good.
Wine's probably an industry where we in the coffee industry could learn a lot from. And you actually did a really seminal routine on this when you competed at the Worlds. I think it was in Amsterdam a few years ago. So you did a routine that basically applied the deductive wine tasting method of wine to coffee. So you could correctly identify by roast and by a number of different factors what the coffee is.
What I tried to do was to use pre-existing language and methodology to very quickly make a point about how I see the future of how we should go about evaluating the coffee product. Retrospectively, and I did that because I wanted to be able to bring hopefully a whole lot of pre-recognized understanding and awareness and detail to say some ideas that I didn't have that much time to say. A routine's not very long. Retrospectively, I think it ended up that it was misunderstood that I was trying to talk about wine tasting. What I really was genuinely trying to talk about was that I feel an enormous opportunity with coffee if we can start to have recognized, identifiable tastes that come from specific varietals, that come from specific terroir locations and countries, And it all talks to what we're talking about now, where to use the wine stuff to help us get there. In wine, if you are a very capable sommelier wine taster, you will expect certain flavors to be present in certain wines from certain varietals that are grown in certain regions. And they are so universally accepted outcomes when they're handled well that these very high quality tasters are able to identify the varietal, they're able to identify the region that it was grown, they're able to identify the producers, they're able to identify its vintage. They're able to identify all of these things because these flavors are expected. In coffee, it seems like we are still at a point where it is very much an inclusivity of anyone can taste anything and it can be acceptable, even if it's not even remotely likely to be in there.
Well, it's acknowledged in your statement as well, as the coffee industry is still relatively young.
Yep.
So,
so that doesn't allow us to talk to quality of place. If this was in place, then the coffee would do all the talking for itself. And maybe that's a large part of what this stand is about saying, hey, we need to be at a point where the coffee is allowed to be itself and transparent and have its value from how well it's grown and handled. Because, like, to point in case, I've tried, and it's probably why my own personal enjoyment of more modern processing methods, excluding the concept of infused coffees, like even just the more modern extended fermentation ones, why some of those things for me are less enjoyable because but I can see their value in that they do present often very one-dimensional processing method heavy flavor outcomes, but that can actually elevate cheaper coffees grown in regions that otherwise have very bland, poorly tasting coffees if they're handled more in a more traditional method. And I see a lot of value in that elevation. I just don't necessarily want to accidentally drink them.
All right, I'm going to head off. I'm going to repeat my extra hot take with 2 sugars here, just to segue into the next part of the podcast. My extra hot take with 2 sugars is this statement was never really needed. And on the basis of, there's 2 parts to this. On one hand, I really like that we opened up the discussion, and it's been huge in the industry. I saw Sprudge posted it. A number of coffee producers have reposted it. Not really seen too many people come out against the statement publicly. I guess you and I will be some of the first, or I'll be some of the first. I won't lump you in on that. But on the other hand, it's like I just don't even think that a lot of this was really, a lot of people are just going to unanimously agree. Okay, of course, co-fermented coffees should not be in a sort of ranking of coffees for Panama, and probably not for a lot of. They don't belong in Cup of Excellence either. I kind of will make an argument that they should be welcomed in competition, like barista competition or Brewers Cup, because if we want to, you used the word inclusivity just before, if we want to have more people be competitive in a barista competition and have it not be a competition like, the English Premier League where the team with the most money wins, then maybe this is one of the easiest ways to do it. And you can't actually police effectively, in my opinion, the use of these coffees in barista competition. So it probably is best to include them. And my understanding is that they are included. I can't verify that right now, but my understanding is that you can use them in barista competition now. And if that was the case in this most recent competition, then look who won. Mikhail Jasin using a wash geisha from Panama. So,
yep. Well, I would probably argue this is where I would get more extra hot takes on, because imagine we were in a shooting competition and someone was allowed a targeting bullet that automatically hits the target. Like I would argue that in competition where a lot of the skills are being evaluated based on the taste that you are presenting in the cup, and that you get scored on the accuracy of what you have described the judge will taste. If you have a unfair advantage, shall we say, by presenting a coffee that no matter how well you execute your extraction of that beverage, that you will achieve those flavors, then I would argue that potentially is just as undesirable as having co-fermented coffees in a coffee tasting competition.
But here's my issue with it. Are we then finding the best barista? Because if everyone's starting from an even playing field and you can use whatever you want, and remember the judges still have to score you and choose you as a winner. And a co-fermented coffee, for a lot of accredited World Barista Champion judges, a lot of them won't like it. They'll score against it. The scoring for some of these can be very fickle, let's just say. So I don't know if you're really finding the best barista then. One of the best, I guess, a few years ago, Martin Shabaya from Kenya placed in the top 6 of the World Barista Champion. So someone from a developing coffee producing country did really well. So I use the word developing there. So we had Boram from Brazil and Macau from Indonesia win this year. But I think Kenya's a bit of a different ballpark. And I think it was one of the best achievements we as an industry have had, having him in the top 6. And he used a CM natural, from what I believe, not co-fermented, but I think having more people, it's just not an even playing field in a barista competition, because to me, whoever has the most money wins. Well, not necessarily the most money, but there's a certain threshold of money you need to be successful.
It would be easy to argue that competition, that I assume you're talking about the World Barista Championships, it would be easy to argue that isn't about finding the best barista, that's actually about finding the best barista who also has an interesting thesis that they want to present, who's also a great performer, who's also a great ambassador, who's also inspirational for the industry. If you want to find the best barista, you need to define what that equals. And so if a competition requires you to be all of these things and you don't have the resources, I'm not talking about coffee per se, any competition requires you to be certain things and meet certain objectives, and then you don't have the resources to do that, then you don't compete. It happens in everything. You don't have people competing in Formula One who don't have hundreds of millions of dollars every year to make cars that cost hundreds of millions of dollars. You don't have people competing at the Olympics that don't have a lot of resource behind them to be able to do, along with obviously some natural talent and skill and dedication, all those sorts of things. But I think that competitions of excellence in their entirety automatically exclude inclusivity in that sense, purely because you do need to have all of those elements together. And yes, lots more support is given in lots of these other industries. Maybe that's the argument that needs to be placed. Not that the competition needs to be adjusted to make it more inclusive, just that industries and national bodies need to actually provide more resources and support to the competitors so that they can compete at that level. Because why do we want barista competitors that have brought the whole resource and effort into an inclusive level? Why do we want to put a cap on what's possible? Because we need to bring everyone along for the ride. I would say that what we need to do as an industry is actually support all countries that are part and all of the participants that are part of the competition, so that we can include everyone's thought process, because plenty of people have lots of really fantastic ideas and lots of things that they want to share about the industry. And it would be utterly naive and short-sighted to say that all of the competitors from producing countries that don't have as much financial resource behind them don't have great ideas because they don't have financial resource. I'm sure they have some brilliant ideas. I'm sure that coffee could go so many ways down the road into the future, a lot better than it currently is, by including their ideas. But what we really need to do is support them to get involved, not necessarily make it so that the people that have great ideas, who just happen to have the luck of having a lot of resource behind them, do too well, so to speak, because they sit in a smaller pool. I feel like that's the wrong way to do it. It's self-limiting rather than opening up the possibilities of where we could go. And as a young industry, surely what we want to do is be better and include all of the great ideas, not just try and make it so that you just work behind an espresso machine slinging flat whites with possibly doctored coffees in there. I think that's limiting ourselves and keeping ourselves as servants.
Sort of putting a cap on innovation in a way you're saying. Yeah.
Well, what great ideas are going to come from saying that, that we can't have advances here, or here?
We are reaching an hour, Craig, and I've disclosed my extra hot take with 2 sugars. You had your extra hot take, just to remind you what it was, because you and I are both getting old in age.
Can I place 2 orders?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh.
2. Double dunk, all right, sure.
Yeah.
Go.
I feel like I need a carry tray for this one. I feel like that was my first extra hot take, is that the way that the coffee competitions in terms of the barista focused ones have been guided has taken away the opportunity for people to really truly push for innovative ideas, and that the irony of the statements a few years ago that said, it's not about a coffee competition. Ironically, that's actually what it's become, because we're allowing all sorts of fermentation methodologies that assist people in achieving outcomes. We're just limiting people's thought processes and thesis complexities and things like that. But my second cup, please.
Stare straight down the barrel.
My extra hot take with 2 sugars, original order, is that modern processing methods are making coffee less good.
Oh, all right. I feel like maybe we should have said this at the start of the podcast. We might go slightly over an hour here, Liam.
Keep going, yeah.
Explain that, please.
I think it's everything that we've been speaking about. I feel that it is the level of clarity of what is being done to coffee as it's being processed, and the lack of that transparency and clarity, is that it's changing what people think coffee can be without necessarily understanding what's involved. And it's leading people's preference to combine it all together, which is having less of the more traditional coffee processing methods be valued, because it's all being lumped together. And I still feel that some of the most incredible coffee tasting experiences that I've had have been with more traditional processing methods. And the level of complexity and elegance and sophistication that these coffees can achieve has been truly, amazing tasting experiences, utterly memorable tasting experiences. And when they disappear because they have higher risk for farmers and not the additional value that they can achieve when they succeed at it, because they can achieve it more simply by just throwing some stuff in with the fermentation, then we lose those. And I think that losing the history is the risk that we have by not clarifying what people are doing to coffee, so that we're comparing apples with apples and not comparing oranges with apples with...
Well, I guess you're more or less largely agreeing with this in a way. Like, I mean, there's probably a myriad contradictions by myself in this podcast, but, I guess we largely agree with a lot of this. Personally, I don't think you really needed to say it, but also I'm glad that you said it, because, we've got shit to make a podcast about. But it's I largely agree with you. So I love some anaerobic coffees. I do think that the oversupply of them, and I guess they say in this saturation, is kind of spoiling what is truly outstanding coffee. The best coffee that you could possibly make me is a truly well done washed geisha espresso. I don't think there's really anything better on the planet than a washed geisha espresso.
My experience is a truly well handled washed, any varietal done properly is a thing of beauty. It's the most transparent version of a coffee's varietal and terroir, in my opinion, and all of them can taste incredible. I don't even think it needs to be as narrow focused as geisha. Surely they have some amazing.
What's the best washed geisha you've ever had from what farm?
The best one that I've had was the coffee that I made with 90 plus for my competition in 2014.
So 90 plus washed geisha of some sort. That was some sort of altered process, wasn't it?
It was hybridized. It included all of the things. I did some pre pulping and fermentation drying. So it spent some time in cherry on raised beds, so starting the fermentation process, and then after a certain amount of time, I don't know if it's supposed to be not spoken about the details or not, but after a certain amount of time, we then pulped it. I chose to pulp it, and then I fermented it as a non-washed fermentation in a tank with a lid, And then after that, we then rinsed it and then we finished the drying process on the raised beds. My whole idea was I wanted to try and capture to capture both the taste expressions, elements of both taste expressions of all of the classic drying methods. And the, arguably it's an extended fermentation, so maybe I need to like it.
Yeah. Maybe you're a hypocrite too, like me.
I think as you get older, you realize you are a hypocrite.
Yeah. But, I think as well, I might cop a bit of punishment for making a podcast about this, but I think the purpose of it was that I really want someone to actually have the discussion. Too often it's done behind closed doors and not done publicly, and he accuses him of that. I'm very glad that this, in a way was made and even to the point where, I'm very glad that Sasha Sestic made those articles a few years ago, opening this discussion. And I mentioned when making this, I was careful. I've only sort of name by name people who are on the record. So Hunter Tedman, Sasha, and Christopher Ferran. These people are on the record saying things. So I'm not just salaciously including them. They said this behind closed doors. There's articles about this. We'll put the links in the description and you'll be able to go read for yourselves. But, I feel like overall, maybe it's a net positive that we've had this discussion.
I think so. I think that definitely discussion around where coffee is headed is super important. And this is part of coffee. People have found positive outcomes for a commercial product, and I don't use the word commercial in terms of specialty and commercial. Positive for something that is sold, and it allows them to make a product that for an industry that's under so much pressure to just survive. Having a saleable product is really valuable. I think that we're just trying to open that conversation around what level of disclosure does it need so that the consumer understands it, so there's not accidental homogenation of all of the coffee product and devaluation by doing that.
And if you're a new listener to this and you haven't actually tried a geisha from Panama, I wod really encourage you to do so. Go look for it. It's truly outstanding. Geisha from anywhere, but for the sake of what we're talking about, go try a Panama geisha. You might have to pay for it. It's an experience. Share it between a few, but do it once in your life, please. You'll thank yourself. You'll thank us for having this and referring you to it. But Craig,
I would say do it more than once, because then you have a reference point for what was good, bad, and otherwise.
Yeah, try some wash, try some natural. Yeah, even try an anaerobic.
Try everything.
Try everything. But that'll just about wrap us up for today. Thank you very much. I'm going to get you back on the podcast in the not too distant future to actually ask you more about you.
Okay.
We've been co-hosting this together is how I'll categorize it. But thank you so much for coming on short notice as well. We wanted to get this out in a timely fashion. So yeah, really appreciate you doing that.
That's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Put it there, Governor. Now, there's a way we sort of wrap this up usually, so I'm going to ask you to jump in on it, even though you're not the type of guy that would usually do this.
Okay.
We wrap it up by saying, at the end of the day, it's just coffee. So 3, 2, 1. It's
just coffee.
Thank you.